So I'm here at the Flowers Gallery in Chelsea with Mr. George Blacklock, and this is his exhibition, Body of Singing, correct?
No, the Body Singing.
The Body Singing. Okay, I stand corrected. So I'm asking him to give me a tour of his exhibition, and I'll follow this up with pictures on our website so that people can hear and also follow along with the images I'm going to take.
Okay.
So tell us about this first one.
Well, this first one is called Glimpse of Bird Singing, and it followed a number of processes to be where it is at the moment.
Okay.
In general, I'd say there's a subtitle to this show which is about release. And the bird singing is kind of a release feeling. You know how you feel when you're walking down the street and hear a bird singing? It was a little bit like that, and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about one of my favourite jazz pieces is by Duke Ellington, the Queen's Suite. Do you know that?
Okay.
And the first few notes of that are a bird song that he transcribed as, great musician. All right, that's, little bit. And I was thinking about that as well.
Okay.
And there is a Spanish painter, Juan Miro, and his Constellation series of paintings are my favourite paintings, and in there's a sense of release as well. There's my favourite one of those is called A Ladder to Escape, or A Ladder of Escape. So there's a sense in these paintings of me releasing out from a kind of constriction some of the forms that I've been using before, and allowing the forms to be more smaller shapes that are bouncing across the surface and kind of relating to each other across the surface rather than all being in any specific group. So that there's more small parts in these paintings than I was doing hitherto. And that kind of was like a bit of a joyous experience in terms of releasing the colour, allowing the colour to be bouncing through the painting. And so that came about in... I'm trying to think of how I can introduce the concept of the show with that. And I was asked about my painting, and I said that when I introduced that saying when I'm asked about whether my paintings figurative or abstract, it makes me smile because they're abstract, but they're actually of my body movements and my body shape. So the body is very important to these paintings. And then I said, but pictorial space is something very abstract, and so it's about my imagination in that space. And then I thought, actually, it's my body singing when I'm making these paintings. So it's both metaphorical and also poetic to say that, I know, but it feels like that to me.
Well, see, what I've noticed also in looking at this, it looks like the free form is layered on top of what looks to be a city landscape, where it's more confined, and so therefore you're trying to release, correct me if I'm wrong, some sort of energy that people would like to, do when they're in the city sometimes. It's funny that you mentioned birds. I garden. And I garden around tree pits.
Yes.
And I actually feed the birds in the morning. And so it's interesting how you're saying that, because it feels almost like, the same thing, that you're trying to, release tension, release negativity to bring about like a joy that sometimes we lose when we're in the city. Is that what you're also trying to say?
I think it's a really good analogy for it. I really do think that. I was going to say in the middle of when you were speaking, I was going to say it's like the High Line. So as soon as we got here this trip, we walked down the High Line, and it is like that sense of a spirit of growth and unleashing.
In the middle of
something
city,
which is more constrained.
Yeah.
Except my city type structure is a little bit more colourful.
Okay.
So I quite like there's a sense of compressed colour in that.
Okay.
And a sense of released colour in
okay.
the shapes that are on it. So it's the balance between the ground and the figure, and then trying to reverse that at the same time. So sometimes the ground comes in front of the figure, sometimes the figure comes in front of the ground.
Okay.
I find that creates a pictorial tension, and that makes the painting more interesting longer.
Okay. I like the shapes, and I like the colours with the shapes.
The shapes are all painted. That's what I meant about them being like the body, because it's me. It's the way my wrist moves, the way my elbow moves, and I'm very I identify that with the body.
Okay.
So and when I'm doing them, the last one you have to do all in one go, so you kind of are dancing around a little bit,
Gotcha.
getting into the rhythm of it, so it's cohesive, it's not stuttered.
Yes, it's not static. It has a lot of energy. Great. So tell me about the next one.
We'll do the blue one around the corner here. This one's called Will Lott's Lot.
Okay.
And I was looking at a John Constable study of a place in Suffolk in England called Flatford Mill. And when he painted in that area, there was always this house in it, and it was a house was owned by this guy called Will Lott.
Okay.
Will Lott's house,
Okay.
this was. And when I was looking at the study, I was thinking about how Constable gets colour to exist in an atmosphere, rather than it to be flat on the surface or in a kind of discrete area. It exists within what seems like air and space. And so I wanted in this to get that feeling of colour existing within atmosphere rather than it simply lying on the surface of the painting.
Okay.
So that's why this, with the scraping and drawing of the paint over the top of the orange, and the orange is coming through. It picks up a little bit of the orange and not all of it, and then restating the orange. You get this sense of the colour being within the pictorial space rather than it being discreetly one thing or the other.
And it looks like there's some sort of structure going on in different corners. Yeah.
So this structure here, the orange shape, is what I call stacks.
Okay.
And that came out of an earlier painting. I did these early paintings called Ancestral Voices.
Yes, I've read about that.
And that was kind of a sense of how our history gets compressed, and what that compression is what we end up being, I guess, in a way. So it was kind of like trying to do a visual equivalent of that. And then once I'd established this figure in it, I started to think what else it could do. So kind of trying to put it into the spaces in different ways. So if we go to the next one, I'll show you how that element became almost anthropomorphic, almost like a stand-in for a figure.
I see it here.
Yeah. So you've got two of them here, and an interesting conundrum that I've always kind of held in my head was with Picasso when he does the woman and the girl in the mirror.
Okay.
And you've got two figures either side of the picture. One is the mirror, or it could be the girl, and one is either the girl or the mirror, but you know that's structured set up. So you've got two sides of the painting, two figures within a space, and they're linked. So I was very interested in trying to get some of that into this painting. So you've got this shape, which came, as you can see, it's right under the blue.
Right.
Well, this shape is not, it's kind of on top of the blue, but then it has this lighter blue kind of pushing it back a bit as well.
So the sort of like a doppelganger. That's
right. So another type could have been twins, or that kind of thing where you get something similar happening, but it is different, and the differences become more.
Because I know religion plays a role in a lot of your work. So is this supposed to symbolize the good and the evil, or the choices that we make in life, or our conscious and subconscious? What do you think these images represent, at least for you?
I wouldn't be so literal as that. I think they carry a kind of feeling of something like that, a feeling of something being in a dark area and in a light area, so that it's more, the feeling of the painting is not so specific. It's a bit more open to a kind of
interpretation, I guess.
Yeah, but I'm thinking the physical nature of the painting is the more important thing for me.
Okay.
So it's the colour that's important, but also there is a background of that tension between good and bad and stuff like that. We're all in that tension. We're a bit good and a bit bad all the time.
All the time.
So that's fine, but I want it to be visceral, so the painting has to be an experience which is visceral. You see the colour, you feel it, you feel the paint is the most important thing for me. Colour, without a doubt, is very important to me. And you'll see similarities in the colour of this one to that one. This blue-orange matrix, blue-orange axis is very important in these paintings, because when I turn them round, you have an orange-blue.
Yes.
So you've got the kind of negative, positive.
Okay.
And that duality runs through them as positive, negative,
like
dark,
that
light.
Painting there too.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not so much the really narrow sort of definition, but sort of an expansive understanding of spirits, I guess.
Yeah. I'm happier when we're talking about how things feel and what the spirit of something is than when it's articulated as a kind of specific, like good and evil.
Gotcha, because that's the whole point of you creating these sort of abstract spaces so that they're not overly defined. Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense.
I think one of the... I was talking with another artist about John Coltrane, and I've often mentioned him when I'm kind of writing about my work, because I often see him as an exemplar of somebody who's digging into themselves and using their music to dig into themselves to find out who they are. Okay. So, you know, that kind of... You think of John Coltrane, he's up in Manhattan, he's in these sharp suits occasionally, in his early days, with these kind of super cool jazz guys, cutting edge, everything very metropolitan. And then he starts to think, well, where did I come from? And then he moves the music and he starts digging back into his own genetic history and that. So you get this kind of, with him, I always get the feeling that what he's doing is finding out who he is. And he's using his saxophone in his music to do that.
Not to lose who he is.
That's a good point too. Yes.
Because in this world, you can kind of lose yourself, and you might need to go back so that you don't forget who you are. Okay.
Absolutely.
That was a great analogy about John Coltrane. Yes.
So that was my interest in the Annunciation, where you have the Angel of Mary. That's kind of redolent in my history.
Yes,
you know, this kind of Catholic history of the Annunciation. But formally that interests me as well, because you've got two figures in the same space, but they actually are compartmentalized often in these paintings. So you get Mary in one space and the angel in the other, and there's this kind of space to represent the difference, I guess, between the heavenly character and the earthly character at that point. And so that duality of that is very much, and I kind of use it in a painting like this, where you have one side of the painting being one figure and one side of the painting being the other, so you get this sense of two things coming together, but they're being different, but they're not being the same thing.
I like that version. Very, very much.
And with paint, you can kind of do that abstractly, rather than have to detail the depiction. From my point of view, anyway.
Wow, that's really cool. I like that very much. This was very good. I'm so glad that I reached out to the gallery to ask, So this is cool, and I'm going to take pictures so people can also walk through our conversation about it. But then let's sit down and talk a little bit more of what got you started.